Good morning. It's the first day in June. I hope you're having a good Saturday so far. About 2 or 3 weeks ago, I tweeted, obviously on Twitter, about Angela Rayner, the deputy leader of the Labour Party. She has been in the news recently with the Tories making up daft smears about her tax and property affairs. She's been, to nobody's surprise, been cleared by the police and the tax authorities. That the Tories were making these smears just so it shows how desperate they are. Complete desperation from the Tory ranks. But Angela Rayner, let's talk about her. So Angela Rayner is a politician that I particularly admire. I disagree with a lot of the things that she's said. She's maybe a little bit more to the left than I am. But I think she's a very shrewd politician. I think she's very smart. And I think her story is very inspiring. And having a story in politics is a really useful thing. The way she's risen from being a teen mother to being deputy leader of the Labour Party, somebody who's risen from low-paid work in the care industry to being one of the great leaders of our political scene. And that's really inspiring. Potentially, I think Angela Rayner is somebody who might one day become leader of the Labour Party and one day become Prime Minister, as it seems very likely that we're going to get a Labour government quite soon. But I do think there's a bit of a problem with her voice, with her accent. Yeah, I do think that with her strong northern accent, she has a potential liability. I think that a lot of people listening to her and hearing her rather rough northern accent are going to think, well, she doesn't sound like a prime minister. As I've said in other videos, the sad reality is that people do judge you about how you look and how you sound. And that is something that if you're in politics, you have to bear in mind. Now, British people may well say that class doesn't matter anymore and that it's great to be working class. And they may well say that they don't really care for posh accents. But the reality is that actually they do. I've mentioned before how people love the voices of Joanna Lumley and David Attenborough and Stephen Fry. And when it comes to political leaders, the British people do tend to choose a posh bloke, often who's come from a private school like Eton or Harrow. We obviously had Gordon Brown over a decade ago with his Scottish accent, but look at the people who followed him. We had David Cameron, we had Boris Johnson, we had Theresa May, we had Liz Truss for a full 2 minutes, now we've got Rishi Sunak. Now, those individuals might not speak in heightened received pronunciation, they might not sound like our king, but they do speak in a contemporary middle-class southern accent that I think most people would recognise as being posh. As I say, they don't sound like the royal family, but they sound very posh, very middle-class, these prime ministers. Keir Starmer, he doesn't necessarily sound posh, but he does speak in a reasonably polished southern standard English accent. So Angela Rayner, well, she just doesn't quite fit that profile. So I really do think, as rotten as that might seem, that I think that Angela Rayner ought to maybe work at trying to soften her accent a little bit and try to sound just a bit more posh. She doesn't need to sound like the king. She doesn't need to speak in heightened received pronunciation and say off and gone and pronounce man as man, but I do think that maybe just a slightly posher accent might make her sound a bit more refined and like somebody who's ready for high office. So I'd be very curious to know if Angela Rayner has ever been offered elocution lessons. I'd be very happy to volunteer as an accent coach for her and give her some lessons in sounding posh, but I suspect that's probably not going to happen. Anyway, that's some food for thought. Angela Rayner, fantastic lady, but maybe you ought to try and sound a bit posh. Anyway, have a fantastic weekend, everybody.